Imagine standing in a courtroom, facing a harsh judge, knowing one small mistake could unravel everything you've struggled to hold together. Lena, a single mother, finds herself in that very situation, but just when all hope seems lost, her young daughter's innocent plea changes everything. What happens next is a heartwarming twist that will challenge everything you thought you knew about justice and compassion. Lena had never imagined herself living this kind of life, constantly on edge, juggling work, and raising a daughter all by herself. But here she was, managing as best as she could. Every morning, she rose before dawn, her mind racing through the day's tasks. Her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, was still sleeping, wrapped snugly in a pink blanket that had been a gift from Lena's mother. It was one of the few sentimental items Lena had held on to, a reminder of simpler times. Lena's days were an unending cycle of work shifts and worrying about bills. As a single mother, her reality was harsh, relentless. She worked mornings in a bakery, kneading dough and frosting pastries, and by evening, she was serving tables in a local diner. Weekends offered no respite. Instead, they were an opportunity to squeeze in extra hours to make up for her ever-growing expenses. Despite the grind, Lena never let Emma see her exhausted or defeated. She wanted her daughter to grow up with hope, not fear. There was a time when Lena's life seemed more promising, though. Years ago, she'd been engaged to Nate, a man who at first seemed to be the answer to all her dreams. They had talked about building a future together, raising Emma in a home filled with love and security. But dreams have a way of vanishing, and hers disappeared overnight. Nate, released from a minor stint in jail for drug possession, had promised her he was clean, that he was committed to a fresh start with her and Emma. But Lena's trust in him proved to be her undoing. One morning, she awoke to an empty apartment. The savings she'd scraped together for years, hoping one day to return to college, were gone. Nate had taken every last penny, but it wasn't just his betrayal that shattered her. He'd left with her younger sister, Tara. The betrayal cut deep, leaving Lena with not only a financial hole, but an emotional scar that made her wary of trusting anyone again. From then on, her life was a daily struggle to pick up the pieces and keep moving forward for Emma's sake. Dropping her dreams of going back to school, Lena focused solely on surviving. Her days were a grind, filled with back-to-back shifts that barely allowed her a moment's rest. And while she was grateful for the bakery and diner jobs that kept food on the table, they weren't enough to erase the ache of everything she'd lost. Still, for Emma, Lena kept going. Her daughter's laughter, the bright light in her eyes, gave her the strength to keep pushing through. Yet, every day felt like a test, each challenge a reminder of how fragile her stability was. And while Lena did her best to manage, there was always an underlying fear. One misstep, one unexpected expense, and her entire life could spiral out of control. This fear became reality one rushed morning. Emma had woken up with a cough, and Lena was running late to her bakery shift. She bundled her daughter up, hurried her into the car, and drove to the pharmacy for cough medicine. But when she arrived, there were no available parking spaces, except one reserved for disabled drivers. Lena glanced around. The lot was empty, and her daughter was coughing in the back seat. She made a quick decision, telling herself it would only take a minute. But it didn't. The line inside the pharmacy moved painfully slowly, and by the time Lena returned to the car, an orange parking ticket was waiting on her windshield. The fine? $200. The amount was crushing. $200 might not seem like much to some, but for Lena, it was over half of her weekly grocery budget. The fine felt like a blow to her gut, a reminder that even the smallest mistakes came with a cost she couldn't afford. She tried to reason with herself, hoping there might be some way to pay it off gradually, or that maybe, just maybe, the authorities might be lenient if she explained her situation. But as days passed, Lena realized that the city wasn't about to offer her any mercy. The court date approached, and with her heart heavy and her nerves on edge, Lena began to prepare for the possibility of facing a judge. She spent nights practicing what she would say, rehearsing her story, and hoping that somehow her truth would reach someone who might understand. And through it all, she never let Emma see her worry. Lena had learned to mask her fears behind smiles and reassuring words, determined to shield her daughter from the harshness of the world. But in her quiet moments, alone in the dark, Lena's heart ached, wondering how much longer she could hold everything together. As the days slipped by, Lena's anxiety grew. The court date was approaching, and the more she thought about it, the heavier the weight felt on her shoulders. She knew that a fine like this could unravel everything she'd worked so hard to keep stable. Missing rent payments, cutting back on groceries. Every possible outcome loomed like a dark cloud. Emma sensed the tension, though Lena did her best to hide it. One evening, Emma tugged at her mom's sleeve, her big brown eyes full of concern. "Mommy, why are you sad?" she asked, her innocent voice breaking through Lena's worries. Lena knelt down, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "It's nothing, honey. Mommy's just working a lot," she said, forcing a smile. In truth, she was terrified. Lena had heard about Judge Mason, the man who would be presiding over her case. Known for his unyielding strictness, Judge Mason was infamous for his lack of sympathy, even for those in difficult situations. The stories about him intimidated Lena, making her dread the upcoming day even more. Determined to prepare as best as she could, Lena spent her nights researching parking laws and reading stories about cases similar to hers. She rehearsed her defense in front of the bathroom mirror, pleading her case to her own reflection and praying that the judge might see her as more than just a violator of the law. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, Lena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might leap out of her chest. She held Emma's hand tightly as they entered the courthouse, Emma looking around with curious eyes, unaware of the weight her mother carried. The courtroom was intimidating. The high ceilings, the solemn faces, and the stern security officers only heightened Lena's fear. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as she walked to the front of the room, feeling every gaze on her as she approached the judge. Judge Mason sat behind an imposing desk, his expression unreadable as he flipped through Lena's case file. When he finally looked up, his gaze was icy, as if he was peering straight into her soul. Lena swallowed, feeling small and exposed under his scrutiny. Her voice trembled as she began to explain her situation, recounting the morning rush, her daughter's cough, and the desperate need for medicine. She spoke of her struggles. As a single mother, the financial strain, and the small mistakes that often led to big consequences. But Judge Mason's face remained impassive, his eyes fixed on her with a detached intensity that made her feel like a criminal rather than a struggling mother. He interrupted her, his tone sharp and cutting. "Ms. Harper, parking in a disabled spot is a violation of the law, regardless of your circumstances. Do you understand that?" Lena felt a lump form in her throat as she nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand. I just hope there might be some leniency, given the situation," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Judge Mason leaned back, his expression cold. "The law does not bend based on personal challenges, Ms. Harper. It is clear that you violated it, and for that, you must face the consequences." Lena's heart sank. She had hoped, even against all odds, that her story might soften his stance. But it was clear that Judge Mason was unmoved, his strict adherence to the law leaving no room for empathy. As Lena stood there, feeling defeated, a small voice suddenly echoed through the courtroom, breaking the tense silence. "Mommy, can we get hamburgers now?" Lena froze, her face flushing with embarrassment. She looked down to see Emma, her innocent eyes wide with hunger and impatience. Lena's heart raced, knowing that her daughter's innocent question had just interrupted a judge notorious for his intolerance of distractions. The courtroom fell silent, and all eyes turned to Judge Mason, waiting for his reaction. He stared at Emma, his eyebrows raised in surprise. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence as Lena's cheeks burned with shame. She squeezed Emma's hand, whispering, "Honey, please be quiet. We're in court." But Judge Mason didn't seem angry. Instead, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a curiosity, perhaps, or maybe even a hint of amusement. "And you, young lady," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "Did you say you wanted a hamburger?" Emma nodded, her face lighting up. Yes, sir. I'm really hungry, and Mommy didn't have time to get breakfast. Lena's heart sank. She hadn't wanted to reveal that detail, fearing it would make her look careless in the eyes of the court. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Judge Mason held up a hand, silencing her. He looked down at Emma, a strange expression crossing his face. Court can indeed be a long and dull place, especially when you're hungry, he said softly. To everyone's shock, he gestured for Emma to come closer, a rare, gentle smile on his face. Why don't you come up here and tell me about these hamburgers, he invited. Lena watched, stunned, as her daughter hesitated, glancing up at her. With a silent nod from her mother, Emma slowly walked up to the judge's bench, her small figure dwarfed by the imposing furniture around her. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what Judge Mason would do next. Emma, tiny and fearless, approached the judge's bench, her eyes wide with curiosity as she looked up at Judge Mason. The courtroom watched in stunned silence, disbelief etched on every face. Judge Mason, the notoriously strict arbiter of the law, was now leaning forward, an uncharacteristic softness in his gaze as he regarded the little girl standing before him. Lena held her breath, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. She couldn't fathom what had come over the judge. Moments earlier, he had been as cold and unyielding as stone. Now he seemed genuinely interested in her daughter, even kind. Emma, unfazed by the tension in the room, nodded vigorously. Yes, sir. I want a hamburger. And Mommy didn't have time to make breakfast because we had to come here fast. The judge's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of empathy flashing across his face. Is that so? He said, glancing briefly at Lena. His tone remained soft, as if he were speaking to his own granddaughter rather than a stranger in his courtroom. Well, I can understand that. Sometimes grown-ups get so busy that they forget the little things, don't they? Emma nodded again, completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. Yeah, Mommy works a lot. She bakes cakes and waits tables, and sometimes she doesn't have time to play with me. Her voice trailed off, a hint of sadness seeping through her usually cheerful tone. The courtroom remained silent, hanging on every word. Even the stern-looking officers seemed to soften, their gazes fixed on the little girl. Lena felt a pang in her chest as her daughter's innocent words laid bare her own struggles, her endless sacrifices. She hadn't realized how much Emma understood, how much her daughter noticed the exhaustion that she tried so hard to hide. Judge Mason's expression shifted again, a hint of sadness mingling with his usual sternness. He straightened up, looking directly at Lena. Ms. Harper, he said, his voice steady but noticeably gentler. I'd like to hear more about your situation. Caught off guard, Lena hesitated. She glanced at Emma, who was still standing beside the judge, looking up at him with unabashed trust. Taking a deep breath, Lena began to speak, her voice soft but steady. I'm a single mother, Your Honor, she started, struggling to find the words that would convey her reality. I work 2 jobs, one at a bakery and another at a diner, to make ends meet. I try my best to give Emma a good life, but sometimes it feels like no matter what I do, it's not enough. She felt her voice waver, but she pushed through, determined to tell her truth. The morning of the parking ticket, Emma was coughing, and I needed to get her some medicine before heading to work. The parking lot was full, and I made a mistake. I parked in a space I shouldn't have. I thought it would only take a minute, but the line was long, and by the time I came out, the ticket was already there. She glanced down, her cheeks flushed with shame. I know it was wrong, but $200 is a lot for us. It's over half of my grocery budget for the week. Judge Mason's face was unreadable as he listened, his fingers steepled in front of him. The silence stretched on, and Lena began to worry that she had somehow made things worse. But then, to her surprise, he turned to Emma. Tell me, young lady, he said, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. What do you think should happen if someone breaks the rules? Emma tilted her head, considering the question carefully. Her gaze flickered to her mother, then back to the judge. Well, I think maybe you should just talk to them and see if they're sorry, she replied simply. If they are, Maybe you can forgive them? A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the courtroom, and even Judge Mason's face softened into a genuine smile. An interesting perspective, he said thoughtfully. You know, Emma, sometimes adults get so caught up in rules that they forget to look at the people behind them. He turned back to Lena, a contemplative look in his eyes. Ms. Harper, he said slowly, I'm required to uphold the law, and it's my duty to ensure that justice is served. However, justice is not always the same as punishment. Lena's heart skipped a beat. Could he possibly be reconsidering? Judge Mason sat back in his chair, a slight nod signaling his decision. Let's take a short recess, he announced. I'd like a moment to review this case further. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as everyone rose. Lena was almost too stunned to move, her mind reeling from the sudden shift. She took Emma's hand, guiding her back to their seats, and sat down, her heart pounding with cautious optimism. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sliver of hope. The bailiff approached Judge Mason, who leaned in and whispered something to him. Moments later, the bailiff left the room, leaving everyone in suspense. Lena glanced around, noticing the curious looks on people's faces as they whispered to one another, trying to guess what the judge might do next. After a few minutes, the bailiff returned, carrying a small brown paper bag. He handed it to Judge Mason, who took it with a nod of thanks. Then, to Lena's amazement, the judge called Emma back up to the bench. Here you go, Emma, he said, holding out the bag. I think a growing girl needs her breakfast. Emma's face lit up with joy as she took the bag, peeking inside to find a sandwich and a juice box. Thank you, sir, she exclaimed, her eyes shining with gratitude. Lena felt tears prick at her eyes as she watched her daughter's happiness. She had come to court expecting nothing but harsh judgment, yet here was a judge showing her and her daughter a kindness she had never anticipated. Judge Mason turned to Lena, his face softening as he spoke. We'll resume shortly, Ms. Harper, but I want you to know that I see you, not just as someone who made a mistake, but as a mother doing everything she can to care for her child. The unexpected compassion in his voice struck a chord within her, and Lena could only nod, too overwhelmed to respond. As she held Emma close, she couldn't shake the feeling that something profound was happening, something beyond the cold boundaries of the law. After the short recess, Judge Mason called the court back into session. The room had quieted, the air thick with anticipation as everyone waited to see what the notoriously strict judge would do. Lena, seated with Emma by her side, felt the nervous energy radiating from the people around her. The compassion the judge had shown moments earlier felt like a distant memory, and she was bracing herself for whatever harsh ruling he might issue. Judge Mason cleared his throat, his gaze drifting over the courtroom before settling on Lena. Ms. Harper, would you please come forward? He requested, his tone firm yet somehow less intimidating than before. Lena rose, guiding Emma back to her seat and stepping forward. She clasped her hands tightly to steady them, her eyes fixed on the judge's face as he regarded her thoughtfully. Ms. Harper, he began, his voice carrying a weight that silenced every murmur in the room. You've explained your circumstances well, and your daughter's honesty has offered a unique perspective on your situation. But I must ask you a question, one that may influence my decision. Why didn't you find another solution to avoid the infraction? There were other options, correct? Lena took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of the courtroom on her. The shame she'd tried to bury rose to the surface as she searched for words. Yes, Your Honor, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But at that moment, I was overwhelmed. Emma was sick, I was late for work, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I just did what I thought I had to do. It was a mistake, and I deeply regret it. Judge Mason's face softened slightly, though his expression remained serious. Thank you for your honesty, he replied. The law exists to maintain order, to ensure that people make thoughtful decisions, even in difficult circumstances. But sometimes, people find themselves in situations where survival overshadows rules. Lena held her breath, wondering where he was going with this. His gaze seemed to shift, almost as if he were weighing something deeply personal. Then, turning to Emma, who was still munching on her sandwich in the front row, he called her up to the bench again. Emma, Can you come here for a moment? Judge Mason asked gently. Emma trotted up to the front, standing by her mother's side. She looked up at the judge with innocent eyes, completely unaware of the gravity of the moment. The judge leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Emma, he began, your mother made a mistake by parking in a place where she shouldn't have, and usually people are punished for such mistakes. But sometimes judges have to look beyond the rules and see the people who broke them. What do you think I should do about your mother's mistake? Emma blinked, considering his question. She glanced up at Lena, then back at the judge. I think maybe you could give her a chance, she said, her voice soft but clear. She works really hard, and sometimes people make mistakes. Judge Mason nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. That's very wise, Emma, he said. Sometimes everyone deserves a second chance. The tension in the room eased, but Lena still felt an undercurrent of worry. She wasn't entirely sure what the judge was thinking, and her heart pounded as he turned his attention back to her. Ms. Harper, he said, his voice returning to a more formal tone, I have reviewed your case, and while your infraction does warrant a fine, I am also considering the unique circumstances that led to this violation. Lena swallowed, dreading his verdict, but holding on to a sliver of hope. However, he continued, Emma here has reminded me of a fundamental truth, that sometimes the law, though firm, can also be tempered with compassion. Today, I am choosing to exercise that compassion. Lena's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as she realized what he was saying. Judge Mason smiled, a warmth in his expression that was rarely seen in his courtroom. I am waiving the $200 fine, he announced, his voice steady. Consider this a warning, Ms. Harper, and a reminder to make better choices in the future. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, people exchanging looks of surprise. It was rare, nearly unheard of, for Judge Mason to dismiss a fine so leniently. Lena's hand flew to her mouth as she tried to hold back tears. Relief flooded through her. The weight of her worries momentarily lifted. But Judge Mason wasn't finished. Furthermore, he added, glancing at the bailiff who nodded and retrieved a piece of paper from the judge's desk, I have compiled a list of resources that might assist you. These are local organizations that provide child care support, job training, and financial assistance for single parents. He held the paper out to Lena, who took it with trembling hands. Her gaze shifted from the document to the judge, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Judge Mason gave her a gentle nod. Ms. Harper, I hope that you can use these resources to find stability and perhaps a path toward a better future. Lena clutched the paper tightly, feeling an indescribable gratitude for the unexpected kindness this man had shown her. She looked over at Emma, who was grinning with excitement, oblivious to the magnitude of what had just happened. Judge Mason leaned back, signaling the end of the hearing. Court adjourned, he said, his tone final yet kind. As the bailiff let him out, he cast one last look at Lena and Emma, his eyes conveying a silent message of encouragement. As they left the courthouse, Lena felt a sense of peace and hope she hadn't felt in years. The future still held uncertainties, but for the first time in a long time, she felt as if she wasn't facing it alone. Emma squeezed her hand, beaming up at her. Mommy, we did it, she exclaimed, her joy infectious. Yes, baby, Lena replied, her own smile breaking through. We did. For Lena, this moment wasn't just a victory in court. It was a reminder that kindness and understanding could exist in places she'd least expected. And as they walked away, she felt the faint stirrings of hope, a fragile but precious promise of better days ahead. As Lena and Emma walked out of the courthouse, the crisp autumn air felt lighter, almost as if the entire weight of her struggles had lifted with Judge Mason's unexpected kindness. Lena clutched the list of resources he had given her, glancing over it as she held Emma's hand tightly. For once, there was a sense of possibility in her life, a fragile but real promise that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. They walked quietly to the bus stop, Lena's mind buzzing with new thoughts. The paper listed several support services, a local child care program, job training courses, and even a financial aid organization for single parents. She read through each one, imagining what it would be like to have some breathing room, to not worry every moment about how she would make ends meet. "Mommy, does this mean we won't have to pay the $200? Emma asked, looking up at her mother with a hopeful grin. Lena nodded, a tear escaping as she smiled down at her daughter. "Yes, baby. Judge Mason decided to let us go without paying. He gave us a second chance." Emma's eyes sparkled with innocence and pride. "It's because you're a good person, Mommy, and you work so hard." Lena hugged her daughter, realizing that no matter how difficult life had been, Emma had always seen her as a hero. That thought alone was enough to keep her going. She knew that this was her opportunity, a rare moment to take charge of her life and create a future she had only dared to dream about. When they got home, Lena sat down with the list of resources, taking a deep breath as she dialed the number for the job training program. It was a small step, but a crucial one. As she spoke to a representative, explaining her situation, she felt a newfound determination settling over her. The woman on the other end was kind and understanding, giving Lena all the information she needed to apply for a training course in office administration. It was a field Lena had once dreamed of entering, back before life had taken its twists and turns. Over the next few weeks, Lena found herself adjusting to this new rhythm. She enrolled Emma in the child care program, which offered after-school care at a reduced cost for single parents. She started her job training, classes in the evenings, learning skills that she knew would help her secure a better job someday. For the first time in years, Lena felt as though she was moving forward, rather than just surviving day by day. Emma's teachers even noticed the change. They saw how much happier and more confident Lena seemed when she picked Emma up from school, no longer hurried or stressed. The weight of constant financial worry had started to ease, allowing her to focus on building a stable life for her daughter. But change wasn't always easy. Balancing her 2 jobs, evening classes, and parenting still stretched Lena thin. Some nights, she would return home exhausted, barely able to finish her coursework before falling into bed. But Emma's joyful face each morning reminded her of why she was doing this. She wanted to be a mother Emma could be proud of, one who could give her a better life than she'd known. One evening, after a particularly long day, Lena sat down with Emma to help her with a school project. As they colored and pasted pictures together, Emma looked up, her little face filled with curiosity. "Mommy, do you like school?" she asked, gluing a bright yellow sun onto her paper. Lena paused, considering the question. "Yes, sweetheart, I do. Learning new things is exciting, and it helps me to become better at my job. One day, I'll have a job that lets me spend more time with you, and we won't have to worry so much." Emma beamed at her mother's words, her eyes shining with pride. "I can't wait, Mommy. And then maybe we can get hamburgers whenever we want." Lena laughed, the sound of her laughter filling their small apartment with warmth. "Yes, maybe one day we can, Emma." The memory of Judge Mason's courtroom still lingered in her mind, a powerful reminder of how one act of compassion could change someone's life. Lena found herself thinking of him often, wondering if he knew the profound impact he had made. He had given her hope, a gift far more valuable than a dismissed fine or a list of resources. He had believed in her, seen her as more than just a mistake, and that belief had reignited her own self-worth. As weeks turned into months, Lena completed her training program, earning a certificate in office administration. She applied for positions at various offices, determined to find work that offered stability and growth. Finally, after countless applications and interviews, she received an offer from a small law firm in the city. The job came with benefits and regular hours, allowing her more time with Emma. On her first day, Lena sat at her desk, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. She glanced at a small photo of Emma she'd placed on her desk, her daughter's smile reminding her of how far they'd come. This job was the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to build the life she had always wanted for them. Lena's journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, struggles, and sacrifices. But she had hope now, and that hope made all the difference. She carried with her the lesson Judge Mason had unknowingly taught her, that sometimes compassion could be more powerful than judgment, and that everyone deserved a second chance. With Emma by her side and a brighter future ahead, Lena was ready to face whatever came next. Months passed, and Lena was finally settling into her new job at the law firm. She adapted quickly, gaining confidence and respect from her colleagues. For the first time in years, she had a sense of stability. Emma thrived too, her laughter filling their home each day after school, a testament to the newfound security that Lena's hard work had brought them. One afternoon, as Lena was organizing case files, she came across a familiar name in a report, Judge Thomas Mason. She stared at the name, memories flooding back of that pivotal day in the courtroom. She recalled his stern face, the unexpected kindness he had shown, and the profound impact his decision had made on her life. The man who had once seemed so intimidating had become a symbol of hope and compassion in her journey. Over the next few days, Lena couldn't shake the thought of reaching out to thank him. She wanted him to know that his decision hadn't just saved her from a fine, it had changed her and Emma's lives. But she hesitated, unsure if he would even remember her or if he'd welcome the message. After all, judges must see hundreds of cases each year. Why would hers stand out? Finally, with a deep breath and a sense of resolve, she decided to write him a letter. She sat down one evening, her heart full, and carefully chose her words. Dear Judge Mason, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Lena Harper. You may not remember me, but months ago, I stood in your courtroom, facing a fine that felt impossible to bear. I was the single mother who made the mistake of parking in a reserved spot to buy medicine for my daughter. You showed me kindness and dismissed the fine, but what you did that day meant far more than I can express. Since that day, I've worked hard to rebuild my life. Your compassion allowed me the chance to breathe, to pursue a training program, and ultimately, to secure a stable job. My daughter, Emma, often speaks of you, calling you the nice judge. Your understanding and willingness to see beyond my mistake have given us both hope and a fresh start. I want you to know that your decision made a real difference. Because of you, I can now provide Emma with a stable life, something I had feared I could never give her. Your compassion has inspired me, and I hope to pass that same kindness on to others in need. Thank you, Judge Mason, for believing in me when I was at my lowest. Sincerely, Lena Harper. Lena sealed the letter, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She didn't know if he'd ever read it, but she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had expressed her gratitude. A few weeks later, while Lena was sorting through her mail, she noticed an official-looking envelope. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the return address, the courthouse. Inside was a simple note from Judge Mason himself, written in his tidy, precise handwriting. Dear Ms. Harper, thank you for your letter. I remember you and your daughter, Emma, very well. Sometimes, in my line of work, it is easy to forget the human stories behind each case. Reading your words reminded me of why I chose this profession. I am truly glad to hear that you and Emma are thriving. Compassion and understanding are as vital to justice as the law itself. Thank you for reminding me of this truth. May your future be bright and your path smooth. And please, if you're ever in need of guidance or support, do not hesitate to reach out. With warm regards, Judge Thomas Mason. Lena read the letter over and over, her eyes misting with tears. His words affirmed the importance of empathy and kindness, and she felt honored to have received his blessing. She tucked the letter away, knowing it would be a treasured reminder of the judge's compassion, a symbol of hope that she and Emma would carry with them forever. As time went on, Lena found herself living by Judge Mason's example. At work, she noticed a struggling intern, a young woman trying to balance her job with night classes, much like Lena had done. Remembering her own challenges, Lena took the young woman under her wing, offering advice and support. Lena's small acts of kindness became a quiet ripple effect, spreading compassion and understanding through every life she touched. She helped organize community drives for single parents, often thinking of those dark days when she'd felt so alone. Her actions became a testament to the power of empathy and how it could transform lives. Judge Mason's single moment of understanding had set off a chain of events that went far beyond the courtroom. He may never see the full impact of his decision, But Lena knew that his kindness had set her on a new path, one where she would continue to pay forward the compassion she had received. And so, with each small act, Lena carried forward the legacy of a judge who had once looked beyond her mistake and seen her as more than just a case number. She saw him as a reminder that kindness had the power to reach far beyond what anyone could imagine. For Lena and Emma, life continued to unfold in ways they could have only dreamed of. And as Lena tucked Judge Mason's letter into a cherished box of memories, she knew that they would both be forever grateful for the man who had changed their lives with a single, compassionate decision. Months after receiving Judge Mason's letter, Lena's life was stable, fulfilling, and full of purpose. She was now actively involved in her community, volunteering at local support organizations and helping single parents find the resources they needed. Her story had become an inspiration to those around her, and in small ways, she was making a difference just as Judge Mason had done for her. One morning, while on her way to work, Lena received a call from an unfamiliar number. Curious, she answered, only to find a reporter on the other end. "Ms. Harper, my name is Rachel Lynn, and I'm a journalist at the City Gazette. I heard about your experience with Judge Mason from a mutual acquaintance, and I'd love to feature your story. Would you be willing to meet with me?" Lena hesitated, surprised. She had never imagined her story would be of interest to anyone outside her circle, let alone the media. But as she thought about it, she realized that sharing her journey might inspire others who were struggling, showing them that hope could arise from even the darkest situations. She agreed to the interview, her heart pounding with both nerves and excitement. A few days later, Lena met Rachel at a small cafe. She recounted her journey, the heartbreak, the daily battles as a single mother, the incident with the parking fine, and finally, the compassion Judge Mason had shown. Rachel listened intently, scribbling notes and occasionally nodding, her eyes warm with understanding. When Lena finished, Rachel smiled, her expression touched. "Thank you for sharing this, Lena. I think your story has the potential to inspire so many people. We rarely hear about the human side of justice, and Judge Mason's actions remind us of how powerful compassion can be." The article was published the following week, titled "The Judge Who Chose Compassion Over Judgment." It detailed Lena's journey, the courtroom scene with Emma's innocent request for a hamburger, and Judge Mason's unexpected kindness. The story resonated with readers, circulating widely on social media and sparking conversations about empathy within the justice system. People from all walks of life reached out to Lena, expressing how moved they were by her story. Some were single parents like her, others were individuals who had felt lost, and many were professionals within the justice system who were reminded of the importance of seeing each case as a human story. The article even reached Judge Mason, who was surprised by the attention but humbled by the impact of his decision. Soon, other news outlets began to pick up the story. Lena's journey had become a beacon of hope for people struggling under challenging circumstances. Her story encouraged judges, lawyers, and law enforcement officers to reconsider the way they viewed their work, reminding them of the people behind each case. Lena also received invitations to speak at local events, where she shared her story and discussed the ripple effect of compassion. She found herself speaking at community centers, schools, and even seminars for social workers and legal professionals. Each time, she shared the lesson that Judge Mason had unknowingly taught her, that small acts of kindness could create a profound impact, often far beyond what anyone could predict. Judge Mason, though a private man, was moved by the attention his decision had garnered. When asked by a journalist about his thoughts on the case, he gave a simple but profound answer. Justice is not only about enforcing rules. It's also about understanding the people who stand before us. Sometimes, a small act of mercy can achieve far more than any punishment ever could. The story continued to spread, touching lives and fostering empathy in countless individuals. But for Lena, the real impact was closer to home. Her bond with Emma grew even stronger, the foundation of their relationship built on resilience, love, and the memory of a small but life-changing moment in that courtroom. One evening, as Lena tucked Emma into bed, the little girl looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, "Do you think Judge Mason remembers us?" Lena smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "I think he does, sweetheart, and I think he'd be proud to know how much he helped us." Emma beamed, her small hand resting on her mother's. "When I grow up, I want to help people too, just like he helped us." Lena felt a surge of pride, her heart swelling at her daughter's words. She knew that the seeds of kindness had taken root in Emma's heart, just as they had in hers. And as she kissed her daughter goodnight, Lena whispered a silent thank you to the man whose compassion had transformed not just her life but the lives of everyone touched by her story. In that quiet moment, Lena knew that the impact of Judge Mason's kindness would continue to ripple out, reaching places and people he could never have imagined. And as she closed Emma's bedroom door, Lena felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the legacy of that one compassionate decision would live on, inspiring others to choose kindness, empathy, and understanding. Lena's story had grown far beyond what she could have ever imagined. The experience in Judge Mason's courtroom had transformed not only her life, but also the lives of people she had never met. People across the city, and even beyond, were inspired by her journey and Judge Mason's choice to extend empathy where he could have been strictly punitive. Months later, Lena was invited to speak at a conference focused on reform within the justice system. The conference gathered judges, lawyers, social workers, and advocates who aimed to create a system that considered both the letter and spirit of the law. Nervous but resolved, Lena stood before the audience, her heart racing as she began to share her story once more. Standing in front of Judge Mason that day, "I was prepared for the worst," Lena began, her voice steady. "I had made a mistake, and I expected to be punished. But instead of judgment, he showed me compassion. That single moment changed my life and the life of my daughter. It showed me that sometimes a simple act of kindness can open doors you never even knew existed." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people who worked in the very system that had once intimidated her. "I'm not here to criticize the law," she continued, "but to remind you of the power you hold to see the humanity in each person who stands before you. A mother, a daughter, a son, sometimes all they need is a little understanding." Judge Mason reminded me that justice, when balanced with compassion, has the power to lift people up, not just hold them accountable. The room was silent as Lena finished speaking. Then a round of applause broke out, growing louder and louder as people rose to their feet. She felt a surge of warmth and gratitude, knowing that her message had resonated. Judge Mason's compassion had sparked a conversation, and now that conversation was leading to real change. After the conference, a familiar figure approached her. Lena's eyes widened as she recognized Judge Mason himself, standing with his usual calm and composed demeanor. "Ms. Harper," he greeted her, his eyes twinkling with a rare softness. "Thank you for sharing your story. It's humbling to know that a simple decision could make such a difference." Lena smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. "I owe so much to that decision, Your Honor. You showed me mercy when I needed it most, and I've tried to carry that same kindness forward." Judge Mason nodded, his gaze contemplative. People often see the law as rigid and unchanging, but it was never meant to be that way. The law is a tool, one that, when wielded with empathy, can create positive change. I'm grateful to see that my choice inspired you, and I believe your story will continue to inspire others. Lena felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes as she extended her hand. "Thank you, Judge Mason, for giving me a chance." He shook her hand, his smile warm. "Thank you, Ms. Harper, for reminding me of the true purpose of justice." As they parted ways, Lena felt a profound sense of closure and hope. She had come full circle, from a struggling single mother in a courtroom to a voice advocating for compassion within the justice system. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought her to a place she had never dreamed of reaching. Back home, Lena hung a framed copy of the City Gazette article in their living room, a quiet reminder of the turning point that had reshaped their lives. Emma looked up at the framed article one evening, her face full of admiration. "Mommy, do you think I can be like Judge Mason when I grow up?" she asked, her eyes bright with ambition. Lena smiled, pulling her daughter close. "I think you could be anything you want to be, sweetheart. And if you carry kindness in your heart, you'll make a difference, just like he did." As the years passed, Lena and Emma continued to grow, both of them shaped by the compassion that had touched their lives. Emma carried the memory of that day in the courtroom, of a judge who had listened to her innocent words and seen her mother as more than just a mistake. Inspired by that experience, Emma developed a deep sense of empathy and went on to pursue a career in social work, hoping to make a positive impact in her own way. Lena, too, found fulfillment in helping others. She continued to advocate for compassion within the justice system and supported community programs for struggling families. Her life had transformed in ways she could have never foreseen, all because of one moment of understanding. In the end, Lena's story was a testament to the power of empathy, a reminder that compassion could change lives in ways that rules and regulations alone could not. The kindness Judge Mason had shown rippled outward, touching countless lives and inspiring a legacy that went beyond a single courtroom decision. And for Lena and Emma, that legacy was something they would carry forward, knowing that the smallest acts of kindness could indeed change the world.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you the best stories.